Well, my name is Angie Chatman, and we're so glad to have you here at Inside Writing. I am a writer and a storyteller. I teach at Gotham as well, basically the intro class Creative Writing 101. This afternoon, I hope they could join us for a talk with Dara, Lurie, and Twinkle Burke. They have founded what's called the TMI Project. And I'm going to hear from them as well as talk about other issues facing BIPOC writers in this, I guess, era, which kind of looks like last era too. But maybe hearing from Dara and Twinkle can give us some hope and inspiration that things are getting better. So Dara, why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd?
Thank you, Angie, and thank you so much for inviting me today, and Twinkle as well. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So I am a writer, and I am also a book coach, work with folks who want to develop books. And most significantly, I am co-director of Black Stories Matter programming with the TMI Project, which is a nonprofit organization based in Kingston, New York. Co-founded by Eva Tenuto and Julie Novak. In the course of 4 short years, we have had an unbelievable amount of programming and talent. In fact, in preparation for today, I was kind of going through the list of workshops that we've had, and it kind of blew my mind how much amazing work has been created in these years. And Twinkle and I came to know each other when she joined. I'm going to let you say which of those programs, but it wasn't the last. It was only the first. And yeah, so we're excited to be here today together.
Okay, thanks, Dara. I'm, as said, Twinkle Burke. I am an actor and writer, among other things. I just finished teaching 4 classes of second and third grade poetry. I learned Google Meet this morning. So I also am a teaching artist. I am a homeschool parent. I've homeschooled my son all the way through. He's going to be 17. I've been working as my writing has just been produced in Florida this year. We're all adjusting to this pandemic world. So I have a play that was also produced and read online. I'm part of the Actor Studio Playwright and Directors Workshop. And I did meet Dara. I did not co-found TMI or this. I met Dara when I did a Black Stories Matter, Truth to Power. My son and I took a workshop with them, which was really significant. And my son talked about him, our neighbors calling the police on him when he was 11. And I spoke about the fact that as an actor, and I'm still seeing it, Black women are put in caretaker roles. We're your nurses, we're your housekeepers, we're your teachers. So that's how I came to get to know Dara. And I actually kind of do a joke. I do so many TMI workshops. I'm always like, okay, this is my 6,789th workshop with TMI because it's such an incredible organization. So, but thank you very much for having me. And
yeah, I think the word.
Go ahead.
I'm glad you're here. And I think the word you were looking for when you were talking about caregiving, right? Because stereotype from the Gone with the Wind movie, Lord help us. Yeah. And that's the thing too. I want to talk about, how TMI is helping all of us see beyond the stereotypes to the wide diversity of stories Black people have. Dara, can you continue with that? Because I think that's what TMI's goal is, whether it's in the actual charter or not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So TMI Project was founded in 2009. And in 2017, Black Stories Matter was launched in response to join the national outcry against the injustice, repeated stories of Black folks being murdered in really just unacceptable conditions. And so since 2017, the mission has really been about bringing marginalized voices and perspectives, stories of Black folks that historically have been either ignored or when told have been distorted or silenced, and bringing those stories to a center stage and to really begin to evolve an understanding that Black stories are not optional to American culture and history. We are not a sidebar. We are not a la carte on the menu of American culture. We are foundational and generative to American culture. And without those Black stories, we are not telling the full story of what this country is about. So our mission is to amplify those voices and support them wherever we can find them. So,
just to jump in, it's just Black stories, it's American stories. It's like not having that division all the time of like, okay, that's Black history. The story of Black people in this country is American history. It's not Black American history. You know, as you said, it's not a sidebar. It's not a la carte. We're picking this, we're going to tell these stories in February and the rest of the year, it's not. You know, Black stories are American stories. And I think that we have, go ahead.
I was thinking, you know, we'll say, well, there's, and then, Hansberry and all of these people.
Sound is weird. I'm having trouble.
Okay. Well, then you go ahead and keep talking. You go ahead and keep talking while I fix it.
Okay. But no, I was saying, you know, it's not, yeah, I see it in the chat. It's not a separate issue. And because people are so interested in, I feel, segregating things instead of saying, you know, my story is your story. I think I heard you say something about Lorraine Hansberry. And one of the things that is known, like about Raisin in the Sun, one of the reasons it was successful with white audiences is because they did see themselves in that family. You know, it's different situations. So, you know, that's what needs to happen with all of our dealings with each other, is recognize how much we are alike, instead of saying, you know, this is the Asian story, which, you know, now I'm even learning, don't even just say Asian. I need to say Korean, Japanese, Chinese. You know, we're not all lumped in. They're not a monolith. We're not a monolith.
Good one. So how does it work at TMI? How would I get my story told? You know, what do? You just knock on the door?
Pretty much. Pretty much. I did. You join. I'll let Dara speak to it, but I just joined a couple of things. It was very easy.
Right. Well, first you sign up to be on our mailing list so you can know about our workshops and know when we are ready to launch another one. And of course, this past year, we did this pivot from doing in person to virtual, which at the time, we didn't know how this was going to play out. I mean, now this is our new normal. But at that time, I think early spring of 2020, we were like, could this work? And we offered a drop-in session, which Twinkle, you were there. And it was just amazing because there was no expectation put on anyone of finishing a piece. We were just, what we needed to do was create intentional space for Black writers and conversation. And by intentional space, what I mean by that is space where Black folks show up, do their writing, and have conversation without knowing that they will not have to justify or explain what is going on. And this became kind of like a pressure valve for many of us, I think, during this summer of just intensity. And from there, we segued into an actual virtual workshop, and then had our performance. I think it was in early October. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Twinkle, but I believe it was early October. It was amazing. It was titled Every Word Spoken. And it was just a beautiful, colorful, brilliant showing of stories and voices that was, partly trying to integrate or process what now is about. So what does now mean? And this now that we're living in is evolving so quickly. These workshops have become really essential, I think, for our sanity, our creativity, all of that. And so, if you want to be on board for a workshop, you get on the TMI Project mailing list, you get the notification, and then when it's a good time for you, you sign up, when we have our next iteration.
Great. Well, that's easy. So I will just knock on the door.
That's really what it is.
Josh, helpfully put that information in the chat so that everybody can see it and sign up. But it's one thing that provides space for writers to write. I mean, I know that that's necessary from a personal standpoint. It's just to be someplace where you're uplifted and validated and encouraged, but that's not the publishing world. So how do you go to the next step, Twinkle, and get your play in, where did you say you were in Florida, was it?
I belong to something online called the Playwrights Binge. It's a group's IO, and they do binge every September and March. They encourage you to submit your work to different places, and they put different places that you can put that on, like send to. So I did it through one of those people. She was artistic director of a theater company that was doing an evening of monologues. In fact, 2 of the monologues that I wrote with TMI are what I submitted.
So how did you know then to submit to this? Is it through TMI that you're in there?
No, it's through the Playwrights Binge.
Okay, through the Playwrights Binge.
Playwrights Binge, they literally do that. And then I also belong to something, and you were talking about space to write. I discovered a couple of months ago this thing, the London Writers Salon, and they have Writers Hour. It was started by Matt Trinetti, I think his name, and Parul Bavishi. And it's 4 times a day from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning that you can write with a bunch of writers.
Zoom.
On Zoom. There's sometimes 200, 300 writers. It's amazing.
It's in London, England, or London, Connecticut?
They're based in London, England, but they're based in England, but they do it in East Coast, West Coast, London, and New Zealand. And when you join during their mailing list, they also have opportunities for people to submit writing.
Well, opportunities too, because that's the thing. I mean, on the one hand, I love writing, but I want my work seen.
Right.
And so does the TMI Project, facilitate that as well? Or is it just because it builds community, then you network and find out?
And one of my favorite things about TMI is like you write to prompts, and they give you 10 minutes and you write, and then it gets longer. But when you finally get down to the story of the real story of the too much information, Dara edits it for you. Yay!
Well, that's a resource.
Definitely. But yeah, in terms of just finding time to write like this, the Writers Hour has been incredible for me. And it is a networking thing. I found also that I've been doing the Sundance Collab. They do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and they give you a prompt and resources, but then they do breakout rooms. And through that, I have met an artistic director who wants my stuff at a theater in San Francisco. And I don't know where this other place, I think it's based in Philadelphia. And
but now it doesn't even really matter where people are, right? Because we are now connecting in this way, no matter where you are. And Dara, you said that that's something, you couldn't foresee, so you rode with it. What did you foresee for TMI? I mean, I know what the motive is now or what you're doing now, but what need were you filling, or, why continue something like this?
Well, are you speaking of what we were seeing pre-pandemic or?
Right, pre-pandemic.
I think
because eventually we're going to go back to that. We're going to keep our fingers crossed that eventually everybody will be vaccinated And it's like, what, now that you've pivoted, are you going to pivot back, or, how does this evolve?
Well, and again, I can only speak for a certain portion of the vision, because the co-directors or the co-founders of this organization are always looking ahead to see what the next thing might be. But I have a strong feeling that even as we hopefully return to some form of normal, that the online piece is going to stay in place, because we've found that it's just so powerful in terms of inclusivity. We're now able to work with folks in San Francisco and Detroit and Orlando or wherever, and bring them into this shared space. So I think whether online or in person, the mission really remains the same. I mean, the problem and challenge of amplifying marginalized voices is not going away anytime that's soon enough for me and the rest of us. But I did want to sort of say something to a question that really Twinkle was answering much more fully than I could have, having to do with resources and how do you, as a writer, make a transition from, let's say, having a workshop space to getting your work seen. And one of the things I've just started to notice, I've thought about, but is that TMI Project really does have a certain amount of amplification in terms of that all of our performances, all of our storytellers have a life beyond the performance, where they're all viewable through our website or directly on our YouTube channel. So for example, we have Reclaiming Our Time. It was a program we did back in 2017, where 7 writers did an overnight in a slave dwelling in the Huguenot village in New Paltz. We were joined by Terry James of the Slave Dwelling Project. And as we were moving to the performance, Maxine Waters was getting busy in Congress saying, "I'm reclaiming my time." And I think everyone remembers what that was about. And so we dedicated that to Maxine Waters. That's just one example of how the work gets amplified. We also have the season 2 of our TMI Project podcast is exclusively devoted to Black Stories Matter storytelling, and Twinkle and Ezra, their stories are on that. It's a beautiful mother-daughter pairing of stories. So there's one level of amplification that is happening. And the other level, which is, I think, relatively new, it's just something I noticed because we're moving into a new workshop, Black Trans Stories Matter, which is going into its workshop mode, I think next week. And we have a performance that will be happening on June 12th. And what we do with these performances is we invite hosting parties across the country. We invite partners to do viewing parties, I should say, not hosting parties. And for this upcoming particular program, one of our viewing partners is CBS Casting. Somebody at CBS Casting is there. And that really sparked all of our curiosity. Who is that person and what are they coming for? So I just feel like, there's kind of a amplification also of folks looking to see, because we do have a lot of talent. We have a lot of writing talent.
Yeah, I love that word, amplification. It sounds like, it represents that we've always been there. And now, for various reasons, the situation is that we are attracting people in the mainstream publishing and media world to Black stories. But, I'm old enough to remember another time. So, how do you all address about making this amplification moment last, so that it's not just a moment, but it's something that is sustained throughout our history and culture as Americans? Because I really like that, Twinkle. So I'm going to go back to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, because Dara and I were talking about this, I think she's a lot more hopeful than I am about this.
Yeah, I think I'm in your bucket.
Yeah, I think that window, it's open now. Everybody wants to hear from us now because the horrific show has been exposed. You know, all these people that like, I didn't know it was that bad. And it's like, we've been telling you. We've been telling you, you know? And so now it's at this point where everybody is trying to do the right things. Do you know what I mean? So they're hiring a lot of people and writers, but I don't know. I mean, I love the amplification. Hello, I speak for a living. I love the amplification, but I don't know. It feels like a window to me. And it feels like a window that someone's going to close a little bit as we get out in the world. I feel like it's going to close a little bit and close a little bit. I hope I'm wrong. You know, so the only way I know to keep the amplification, like, as I said before, I'm an actor. I have auditioned my face off. And because it is this moment where they're going, oh, we need to have more people of color and Black people on this. And so we're working. I'm hoping that it stays, that you see us, that you see us, that you see us. So you don't forget, but I don't know how else to.
Well, I think maybe we could be hopeful because, like I said, I'm in your camp. The fact that, you know, in schools, they talk about windows and mirrors. And it goes back to you talking about A Raisin in the Sun, where white people saw themselves in the mirror too. So maybe they'll hold the window open more if they're, you know, mirrors, if they can see themselves as well. So that it's like, it's not just a Black thing or a Hispanic thing or an Asian thing, but it's an American thing.
An American thing. That is, I signed a petition called We See You White American Theater.
Wow.
And people go back and forth about it. I read that thing and I was like, oh, you're really telling them all that? Really? And if you
what
look,
is the name, Twinkle?
We See You White American Theater. And if you look at the list of people that created this document, I think it's a 15-page document, and talking about what Black and BIPOC actors and crew members and stage men, what they're talking about, what the things that have happened to them, to us. So I went, they had a town hall a couple of weeks ago. Dominique Morisseau spoke from her heart, you know, and, you know, she did the Temptation. Yes. It was amazing. And it was, I mean, I think it was cathartic. I think it's something we should have done 6 months ago, because now we need to know what next steps. I went to the one for the Asian community and listened to, and I had my heart opened and changed because, you know, I was saying, oh, the proximity to whiteness. And then when these Asian students and professionals and Che Yu spoke about how he had been spoken to and things that were said to him, and I thought, this is just horrific. We need to all be together and say, instead of being divisive, all be together and say, like, okay, this is enough. So like the We See You White American Theater, people are going back and forth because they're anonymous. They're anonymous because there can be retaliation. It's that window thing again. What if once, you know, everybody's out in the open, Broadway's open, theater's open, and they point their fingers at, you were in that movement, and so you won't work now. You know, it's a real issue. It's a real fear of speaking up and speaking out. But I think also, you know, we have to, you know, amplify our own voices. We have to be heard and keep being heard.
Well, before I go back to you, Dara, we had a question in the chat from Lisa who said, well, should writers have the freedom to write about any characters they choose? I mean, we're talking about Black stories, but does that mean that white people can write Black stories because they're American too?
Well, I mean, I'm going to,
Dara, yeah.
Do you want Twinkle to answer that?
No, and Dara, and then Twinkle she's musing. I can see the emotion, so we'll go back to her.
Well, I mean, just off the cuff, I think anybody can write about anybody, but can they do it well? And is it going to be something that is seen as frivolous, as seen as disrespectful, or is it going to be something that's going to be taken seriously? I think that, I think at this stage of the game, there is a very powerful community of Black writers, commentators, pundits, whatever you want to call them, who, do not let things go, are watching, are scanning the cultural conversation to see if they feel that justice is being done, so to speak, in many ways. So yeah, I mean, sure, you can write about folks, but can you really do it? That's my thought.
Right. Is it good? That's the real question. In fact, it reminds me of, we were talking about music with the Abby Lincoln song at our opening. And I remember Miles Davis's famous quote about music, music is either good or bad. It's all music. Twinkle, you wanted to address that though?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't remember the name of the book because I didn't read it, but it was part of Oprah's book club, I think, the white woman that wrote about the Mexican woman.
American Dirt.
Yes, and how much that stirred up. But the other thing I think about culture, like as Black and BIPOC people, we know a lot about white culture. We know a lot about white culture, so we can write those stories. So it speaks to you, Dara. If you don't know about my culture and you don't know about me, you have no business writing about it. I just submitted a monologue to a festival, and the character's name is Clodagh, and she's Irish. And it wasn't. The other thing is, like, is the race? Is it a plot point? Because I don't always want to be. I don't want my race to always be a plot point. You know what I mean? She's Black. She's Black. She's Black. Yeah, I'm Black, but I can still talk about, sunshine or whatever, But I'm wondering if, because they do know I'm a Black woman writer, if they're going to accept this piece written about a white Irish girl. Mm. And it really isn't, her being white isn't the plot point. The plot point is that and it's, it's a COVID monologue, because here we are. Yeah,
because it's COVID all day, all the time.
Woo, I'm taking my son to get his first shot today. So, like everything is doing it. But she's at her father's hospital bed, and she is talking to him. Now, one of the things that happens with my writing, I will always, always write, if not a role for me, a role for someone that looks like me. I will also make sure that that person is not the only one. You're not the token Black person. And there's always, right now, because it's so prevalent, there's always an aspect of race in my work. So this Clodagh is talking to her father about the fact that she married a Black man. Because I think that's another way to amplify. Let's keep talking about it. Let's keep putting it out everywhere.
Well, and the other thing is the adage, write what you know. I know about race. I live it every day. That's what I write about. It was germane to my upbringing and experience. So, but, I also have been around white people. So I think I can write about them too, because there is a shared humanity across all races. But I think the difference is, and I want you all to respond to this as well, is that writing is not the issue, because you can write whatever you want. The issue is really publishing. And publishing as a business is much more into, where do we fit this so that we can sell more of them, which is what American Dirt.
The pigeonhole.
Yeah.
The pigeonhole.
Yeah, you can continue, Dara. Go ahead. More.
Well, yeah, I actually, thinking about our conversation, I called a good friend of mine who's been in publishing for 20 years to speak to her about that question. And what she said is not a big surprise, that publishing has been the province of rich white men, and they've been the cultural gatekeepers for a very, very long time. But something has changed very quickly in the last 2 years. So apparently, this is not something I have tracked myself, but in this conversation learned that there were about 7 or 8 Black editors a couple of years ago in positions where they could buy manuscripts, and in that position. And in the past 2 years, that number has maybe doubled. So that is something that will, I think, last beyond this moment. And it is one of the small reasons that makes me a little optimistic that there's this understanding the demographic is shifting in this culture, that simply the numbers are shifting. And so for an industry to remain relevant, it has to be representative of a demographic, because people aren't going to buy your books if you're not talking about them.
Dara, by relevant, you mean profitable.
Profitable, yes. The bottom line.
Bottom line.
Yeah. And also, there was a great essay from Tressie McMillan, who I adore, from Roxane Gay and Tressie McMillan's podcast. She wrote a great essay in Thick about this whole question of commentary, like why, for example, does the New York Times not have a Black woman commentator? And this was her thing. She just kept talking about it. And recently now Michelle Alexander has been hired to become, I believe, a cultural commentator for the Times. And I think that's really important, even though it's not directly related to selling books. It's about this larger, more complex conversation of how do we shape culture? How do we shape value? The perception of value in our culture. In other words, what stories are valuable? What do we need to know to show up for our American discourse? And so when we have Black women and Black commentators in these very visible positions, it uplifts the value of the Black perspective within the American discourse. And I do believe there is an effect that then filters into the publishing landscape as well.
Yeah, the new editor of Vanity Fair is the same way, where, she's pulling different ideas, not just in terms of race, but just in terms of things that resonate with her. And because of who she is and her experience, we're getting different types of, I shouldn't say spin, but reflection in that mirror. Different stories. So
and I just want to add, I just add this so it doesn't, because what really struck me from last summer when the numbers were all crunched about who was showing up for these demonstrations, who was showing up to protest the murder of George Floyd, and that the numbers were showing in these majority white counties, that the numbers, not just the majority white counties, but in various counties throughout this country, that the demographic of the demonstrators skewed white and skewed upwardly, earning of 70,000 and upwards. So a well-to-do white demographic was the predominant number showing up for that particular conversation. So there is this awareness that Black conversation is American conversation.
Twinkle, are you convinced? Are you feeling more hopeful?
No. I think.
Sorry, Dara, try it again.
I think the thing that we really, because, there's so many things that within our race, within other races, I worry about being like, you've got one Black story, I'm good. And then that's how all Black people are, and I come across that quite a bit. That sort of head tilt, like, oh, it's in, I have a play that's called The Weight of Skin, and I'll put it in the chat so you can see how it's spelled. And the main character, and I've used all, the family's name is Arbery. The mother's name is Brianna, because we're not gonna let this go anywhere. Mm-hmm. All of the white people in the play are interchangeable. They're playing different because we've been used as interchangeable. And so it's important to me that we are allowed to be Black or Latinx or Asian how we are, instead of being told by a publishing industry, by Broadway, by TV, this is how Black people are. This is how this people. And so I worry about being lumped together. All Black people are like this. All in everything.
No, but I was thinking that, you opened with the fact that you also write with your 17-year-old son and you homeschooled him and all that kind of stuff. And I have a 16-year-old daughter, and it's so different for them. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that, because actually, as much as I'm cynical with what Dara is talking about, I do believe that the next generation, they don't have that mess, and when Dara talked about the demographic of who was marching, not only were they white and had some money, but they were young. In fact, one of my storyteller friends, she actually talked about marching and how, she had marched back in the 60s and the 70s. And she realized that she was too old to march because she didn't have the right shoes to be marching. And she also didn't want to stop in some gas station to go to the bathroom, So it's like, yeah, you young people, you go ahead and take care of that.
Well, there's different lanes for all of this, though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, talk about that.
I'm on Instagram a lot. And when they say call, sometimes I get nervous about call, but you want me to send an email? I'll send it. I'll write an email now, and everything is valid. Everything that you're doing to your capability is valid, right? It goes even as your voice as a writer. Your truth is your truth, and this is what you can do, so you do it. I am not a particularly big marcher. I live in Beacon, New York. There's been marches, there were marches every Sunday. And we now have a group of young people that are really taking the reins here. And I'll go to their march and I'll do their stuff, but I don't chant. Like chanting in the street, I was like, no, that's not in my heart. That's not in my heart. I worked at a commercial where they wanted us to chant, and I was like, oh no, I'll be that person pointing. So I know what my capabilities are. And I do think you're right with young people. My son, I run a homeschool group, and there's a history professor from Hunter that teaches classes. And the education that he is getting, I have to read his history book, The Lies Teacher Told Me by James Lewin. And he sat here and just kept he can't curse in front of me. If he could, he would have, because it was the truth of the history that I wasn't taught. My son is he's taking American history from an African perspective is one of his classes. He's taken a class called Holocaust and Humanity. So he's learning things. So definitely, the generation coming up, I'm lifting you. I'm thanking you, because he has thoughts and feelings that I didn't have at that age.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I just am not going because I don't have the right shoes, and definitely don't want to pee in a gas station bathroom.
Right.
Dara, one of the other questions that come up is about, are some of these the questions that come up in sessions at TMI? These are some of the conversations that are happening? Because again, we were talking about it being a writer space, Can you talk about the other things that TMI offers for these kind of conversations to take place?
I'm not sure. Could you say that a little differently? I'm not quite sure where to.
Well, I'm just thinking of what else do you offer, basically, if I was, in terms of your menu, at TMI. So there's workshops, and what else?
Yeah, well, actually, because I did have one eye on a question in the Q&A from a woman who was asked, I believe a woman, but who's asking about resources for beginning writers of color.
Mm-hmm.
And while I feel like Twinkle's probably better set up to talk about the wider what's out there, and I think you've mentioned some great resources already. I can say that the resources through our Black Stories Matter programming are really, they're wonderful because they're so soup to nuts. In other words, we offer space for, with the writing prompts, we offer space for conversation so that it's not just you come in, you do some writing, and then boom, you have a finished story. There is space for expansion, for thought. but then we move it into something that then gradually becomes more formatted. So I feel like there are a lot of resources just packaged within the Black Stories Matter workshops when we offer them. This is more of a listening resource. We are doing a quarterly Inside Black Stories Matter roundtable and discussion, which is really amazing. Our last guest was in December. I might be skipping one, but in December we hosted Elizabeth Lord Rollins, the daughter of Audre Lorde, for a discussion on reproductive justice, and we had a storyteller paired with our expert. So those are some of the general resources, but I think what you're asking, and certainly the question in the Q&A having to do with the resources, I would say TMI Project offers a lot for Black folks to, and coming from all levels too, that's the thing. Some folks identify as writers, some folks don't. They just know that they have a story or many stories. And our space is set up in a way that allows for folks who don't have maybe the writing chops to come in, and we help them emerge the stories. And then, as Twinkle said, either I or my co-facilitator, Micah, will work with that writer and help them edit it and understand how to build it and make it a strong, completed story.
Yeah, I was trying to get back to that because Twinkle made it sound like it was magic. You just hand it over to Dara and it's pretty. So well, as an editor, I know that's not the case. So I wanted to talk about, are you the only one? And, how does that work in terms of process? So it sounds like there's a clear process, and people can basically join your newsletter to find out more about when these things are offered. And yes. They can, okay, great. Let's give a shout out to TMI and Black Stories Matter. Let me see what else is in the chat if everybody got their questions answered. I'm glad you guys are picking them up too.
Yeah, I just put some stuff, the links to the things I was talking about.
Great.
Writers Hour, new play exchange. And this is just, it's good to read plays and to good, there's playwrights that I've read their work and they've given me freedom to do certain things that's not the standard white American theater. This is how you have to do it.
You're going to have to explain that a little bit more. What do you mean they gave you permission?
Well, like Susan Laurie Parks is a playwright, and
Pulitzer Prize winning.
Her plays uses an ellipsis instead of a beat to tell the actor you got to take some time.
Okay.
And I thought, so she uses different formats, not necessarily what is always tried and true. That and there are places that won't accept it differently, but it's getting better. She gave me permission to do that in my play. My play has magical realism in it. There are different plays that I've seen and read and movies even that I go, hey, I'm gonna put that in my play. So there's also more freedoms. I remember Jeremy O'Hara, when he was at school, was told he was gonna have some, I don't know whether it was a screen or something, and he was told, this is a play, this is the theater, you can't do this. And it's like, I'm looking at younger writers and actors that are saying, yes, I can. I'm creating my own world. I can do anything. Mm-hmm. So this thing I'm saying about the new play exchange, I think it's less than $20 a year, and you can go and read plays. I have a filter set to Black and BIPOC playwrights. And when a new play is posted, I can go read it. So it's a great resource to just see, to help me develop my craft as a writer. And one of the things I saw in Dara is that I'm spinning it positively, sort of chameleon-like. Here in Beacon, we used to have a writer's salon. And I said, if I was going to the literary writer's salon, I had to read. So that meant I had to write. Do you know what I mean? And so then I was writing a lot of prose because that's what was happening there. I'm working for teachers and writers and I'm teaching poetry. So I'm writing a lot of poetry now. I'm part of the Actor Studio Playwright and Directors Workshop. So I've been writing a lot of plays. With the Sundance collab that I put in there, I've started looking at screenplays again. So it's just, moving around, doing just self-expression.
And storytelling. It's just what
absolutely.
Platform. It's all about stories. Cool. So
someone asked, I'm sorry, they wanted formatting software for playwrights and screenwriters. I used to use Final Draft, and then a former writing group that I was in, I went on a writing retreat and Final Draft wasn't working. So I use something called Fade In now. And Fade In, once you get it, you get free updates forever. Final Draft, you have to pay. I've had to pay them twice because they got some upgrade that I needed to pay for. So
cool. Okay, well, we're coming down the home stretch. Are there any final remarks you want to make, Dara, about the organization, like where to give money, for example, or how to get involved, or because you are a nonprofit and, you know, might as well do a little shout out for that. And then also just some final encouragements, not final, but more encouragement about getting involved and making this happen so that it's not just a single moment.
Yeah, let's see where to start. I mean, I think that TMIproject.org, and I believe that was in the chat, but if it's not,
it's worth saying out loud for audio people, audio learners, right?
Right. TMIproject.org is got everything that we're talking about. There's a ton of resources, a ton of videos you can watch, blogs that you can read, and certainly donation buttons are there. And what we do for all of our performances is that they are free. They're accessible to everybody, and that's how they should be. And we just encourage donations as you can. And we've been really fortunate. We have very, very generous audiences who show up and show out and really support our work. So there's a part 2 to your question. Can you remind me? I can only hold like
basically it was just, you know, how to get involved and take advantage of your services. Yeah,
I would say, again, go to that website, poke around, see what's there. We have, I believe we may have an open call for stories about experiences during the COVID pandemic. We did one reading last year based on that. We had an open call, and I think 6 stories were selected, and we had a performance. And the way we do performance, because so many people at TMI Project, for example, Eva Tenuto has this theater background. So we create a theater experience. It's not just, I mean, here we're all visible and, you know, it's a great format, but we really try to recreate a performance experience in Zoom for these performances. And it's, you know, it's an adaptation and it's fun and does create a little bit of that. So I can imagine that we will have another performance at some point. I'm not saying absolutely, but of open call stories around pandemic experience. That's definitely one way that folks from all backgrounds can get involved. And we do have 4 areas of social justice work and storytelling that we address. Black Stories Matter. We address LGBTQIA and rights, mental health, and gender equity. So we're really looking around to pull in all voices from groups who have been really marginalized. And we really believe that this is the way we're going to change the cultural landscape. And it's one story at a time.
Well, I'm glad to know you as you do this. And it's so worthwhile and just uplifting. And I'm almost at the hope part. Twinkle.
Angie, you and I we're gonna
be really,
yes, we're gonna be okay. I'm not gonna let that window close. No, yeah, I encourage all of you, because somebody in had a question about novel. What was the question exactly? Talk about some resources for first-time novel writers. You know, I think the way that I really got going was I just started and I started joining, you know, in the before times, you could go to a coffee shop and sign up and say, I'm going to read, you know, and the resources for first-time memoir writers. I think there's places that you can go and they're certainly on Zoom now that you can share your work, or you can be encouraged to just do it, to just amplify your own voice and tell your story. You know, I have to say that one of the things with TMI, I encourage everybody to sign up for one of these TMI workshops.
Yeah, that's a basic. Can we get everybody just to commit to signing up?
I always feel so held and so seen and so heard. And they have pulled stories out of me that I haven't thought about in years through some prompt of whatever. And I have done the Black Stories Matter, and then I've done the one that's just for anybody. And it has actually really helped me develop my writing voice. You know, and then it's just like, sit down and do it. Like the writer's hour, I write with New Zealand almost every day. From 8 o'clock in the morning, they're 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock is 4 o'clock here.
Wow. You're fierce.
Yeah, and it takes the pressure off you. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I got to find time to write. Nope. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand. I'm going to write for an hour.
Where are my Kiwis at?
Right? Yeah, it's great. But, you know.
Kiwi.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I have so enjoyed talking to you. When we started before, all the panel members came on, it was like, this is going to be a conversation between a couple of amazing Black women, talented and smart. And it exactly was. And so I'm energized and I'm held and I'm validated and I'm grateful to the both of you. And I'm grateful for Gotham for bringing you in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. I'm loving seeing the chat and being able to share this stuff.
Yeah, and you're going to see more of us all, because I think everybody's going to go to that TMI website, tmi.org, right? And sign up. I know I am.
And
I'm going to writers' hours.
Yeah.
Before we break, Angie,
Sure.
I want to speak to that question I saw in the chats of.
No, we don't have to leave right now. Go ahead.
Okay, I mean, I don't have as specific information. I knew, Twinkle, I knew you would bring all these great resources in. I just want to say to the folks who are asking, what are the resources in a general way? I think that, and as you're saying, Twinkle, there's so much out there to kind of pick from. But to start with, you want to find spaces that are going to allow you to explore without shutting you down. Without coming in too heavy on the critique side, because one of the things I've noticed about certain writing circles is that people kind of go crazy on this, I'm going to critique this until it's just all, in shreds kind of attitude. But really in creative process, you need that space. You need that open space to wander, to get lost. We call it the shitty first draft in our spaces, but whatever you want to call it, look for those spaces that aren't going to come at you and critique the life out of your work. And then when you're ready, if you need to shift space, look for those spaces where you're going to get smart feedback and trust your gut about it as well. If you don't leave empowered from a writing conversation, you need to leave that room.
And run from that room.
Yes, you do. I don't care how smart those folks look. They are not in your best creative interest. You need to feel empowered by the feedback you get. So choose your spaces wisely. There's a lot out there to choose from, and trust your gut about that. Those are the resources, I think, for beginning, intermediate, and advanced writers, but especially for beginning writers as you're developing a sense of yourself as a writer. It's so crucial because it's a fragile endeavor.
Yeah. It sounds like really the first step is just to go to Dara.
Yeah, just go to TMI.
Just go to TMI and Dara, and she'll help you and take care of you and love on you. And so, and I appreciate you doing that this afternoon. Twinkle, a pleasure meeting you. Please come back. Oh, shout out to Gotham. Really, Gotham brought all this together. And our Wizard of Oz behind the scene, Josh Sippy. Way to go, Josh. All right. Take care, everybody. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you, Josh. Bye. Bye, Twinkle.
Bye, Dara.